Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Abitchonistim. It's a great pleasure to be joined today by former Ambassador Eli Yerushalmi, who always gives us an amazing overview of everything that is happening in the Middle East. Eli, so good to see you.
Great seeing you too.
So, I'm not going to ask a specific question. I just want to get your general assessment of what is happening right now, the geopolitics of the Middle East, please.
Thank you very much. First of all, what's happening now is one big wow. Who could have predicted, the events that happened in the last few weeks? For sure, I didn't predict this. We were just, talking about Assad and so on. Nobody predicted this kind of thing. But definitely, what's happening in Syria is almost of biblical proportions. You can't describe it, differently. The collapse of the Syrian regime and what's happening in Syria, which is, as you know, is not really a normal country because it's built out of many separate entities, such as the Kurds and the Alawites and the regular Sunnites and many more groups. So this is something major in Middle East history, and also I think will involve will affect world politics. For the first question is what's going to happen in Syria? Israel is, of course, not taking too many chances. The Israeli military is taking up positions along where it's supposed to take along the Israeli border to protect the Israeli townships in the Golan in the region. To take, of course, Mount Hermon. I assume that most of you saw Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday on the peak of the Hermon with a fantastic view with all the clouds underneath, and knowing the view from the Israeli Hermon, the higher part of the Hermon, you can see all of Lebanon and large parts of Syria and almost all of northern Israel and northern Jordan is just strategically, that's amazing. And all the positions that we're taking right now inside Syria. Inside Syria, of course, there's a major conflict going on between the different groups. It's hard. It looks like Jolani, the guy who ran this rebellion, is taking control, but I think this is very short term. I think every group will want to take its power inside Syria, and it's hard to say what exactly is going to happen. Knowing Syrian history, I assume it's going to be violent, but we pray it's not. Maybe things are going to change, for the better, and we might even see some kind of deal which will unite Syria in a way that all the parties will be satisfied, and maybe also we will be satisfied. The man is talking about, there's no reason to attack Israel anymore, and so on. These are things that we didn't think we're going to hear from him. He's an ex-Daesh person. So, as we say in Hebrew, gay vase, we don't know what's going to happen in Syria, but it's interesting. There's another big question: what's going to happen with the refugees? Are the refugees going to come back from Europe, or they're going to come back from Turkey and Jordan, where they settle right now? We're talking about 7 million refugees. So that's also a big question. Are they going to return to Syria? We are, of course, we have to keep in mind two minorities in Syria, which are that we favor, and they also have a relationship with us. We're talking about the Syrian Druze, and we know already that the Druze in Syria that live very close to the border with Israel on the Golan, they already want Israel. Some of them already expressed openly that they want Israel to annex the all the Druze townships and villages along the border of the Golan to Israel. And of course, we have the Kurds, which are mostly in the northeast of Syria. They're also a minority that we favor. These people assisted us, especially during the war with Iraq. And we have a friendship going on with them for many years. Of course, the Kurd story is a big tragedy because there are I think, about 20 something million Kurds, and they don't have an own independent state of their own because they're spread between Syria and Iran and Iraq and so forth. So they have a big problem. And of course, the biggest enemy is Turkey. And Turkey is a major player in the Syrian game. Yesterday, there were a lot of items about maybe Syria even invading Syria, Turkey invading Syria. Turkey is already inside Syria in many areas of the country in the north. And if there will be a Turkish invasion of Syria, no doubt this will be bad news for the Kurds. We'll have to fight them because the war is going to be mainly against the Kurds. But we don't know what's in our Erdogan's mind concerning the rest of Syria and concerning getting closer to Israel. Meaning, yesterday I heard professors who are experts in Turkey saying, there are Turkish thoughts, maybe the president himself, that they want a clash with Israel. So these are things that are hard to imagine, a war between Israel and Turkey. Already we have a lot of animosity, but still a lot of trade going on. The relations are still there. Hard to say what's going to happen with relations with Turkey, but Turkey is going to be a major factor in the Syrian issue. We have Russia. Russia has had many forces inside Syria. It supported the Assad regime. Now Assad is inside Russia itself. He probably is going to live there maybe for the rest of his life in Moscow. He's not going to have a bad life, by the way, because I heard that he took with him $250 million and he already bought 20 apartments in Moscow. So I think he and his family will be doing pretty well in Russia. But the Russians are now evacuating Syria, and they're leaving all their bases there. I also wanted to mention that basically Israel is conducting now aerial raids on what used to be Assad's army. So all this army won't fall into the hands of the new regime in Syria, and Syria will have to build a new military for many, many years to come if they are interested in going again into wars with Israel. It's simply unbelievable to see the Syrian army, which threatened Israel for so many years, being destroyed now, uncontested, to see all their jets and the navy and then tanks and so forth being destroyed. For an Israeli, it's something which is still very, very hard to believe. We also have an issue with Jordan. Jordan has an issue, first of all, with instability in Syria and what it means for her. That's a major question. And the Jordanians are moving their forces, excuse me, to the north. And the issue, will Iran see Jordan as a weak spot in order for Iran to penetrate through Iraq into Jordan and onto the Israeli border? And the Israeli-Jordanian border is very much an open border. It's not so closed with minefields and barbed wire and stuff like that. And that's why a lot of the Israeli settlements and so on along the Jordanian border are fearful of what will happen now on this border. So Jordan is also a country that we have to take into consideration. So this pretty much covers the Syrian issue, if you wish. Then we move on to Gaza. In Gaza, of course, we still have there are a lot of talks about maybe a deal on the hostages. There's a very good chance of this happening shortly. The issue now is, will we get all our hostages back, part of the hostages back? What exactly is the deal? So all this is going on right now. No doubt that the future president of the United States, President Trump, had a lot to do with this, because he basically threatened the Hamas that if all the hostages are not going to be returned by the time he enters office on the 20th of January, it means for the Hamas and for its allies, all hell loose. And that is something which, and he said that America never struck somebody the way he's going to strike all these the enemies of the United States in the Arab world if the hostages are not going to be released. And by this, it means not only Hamas, but also Iran, and we'll talk about Iran shortly. In Lebanon, it seems like the agreement so far is holding on. This is a 60-day ceasefire. It's hard to know what exactly is going to happen. The Hezbollah is in a very bad situation, to say the least. Now that the line of supply between Iran through Syria to Lebanon is basically cut. So we'll have to see what happens with them. And of course, the most important question is, will the Israeli people who left the townships, Kiryat Shmona, and all the other places along the border, when will they be able to return back home? Moving to another issue, Yemen. Yemen has been kind of, firing rockets and throwing all kinds of things at us once in a while. No doubt that the Houthis are in a very difficult situation. They also depend a lot on the Iranians. So we'll have to see what's going to happen with them. The Americans and British are already attacking all kinds of targets in Yemen, but no doubt that Israel is going to conduct, probably in the very near future, a major attack on Yemen, and I assume it's going to be a very devastating attack on the Yemenites. I hope, we all wish that they will also crack, because they're not so powerful as they're trying to play the game. And now we come, of course, to the most important issue, and that's Iran and its nuclear capabilities and where Iran is right now. No doubt that Iran is in a very difficult situation. It basically lost the war. It lost most of its satellites around the state of Israel. It lost what we call the circle of fire around Israel. And the Iranians are in pretty much in a mess. They're still threatening us. I heard even today that they still owe us, quote unquote, an attack. Let's see what they do. It's going to be very difficult, but my position is that as long as the Iranian nuclear issue is not gone, we haven't finished our task yet. I hope it's going to be done now. I hope it's going to be done probably after President Trump gets into office. If it's not done now, it's going to happen in months, years. I think we have to finish it now, as we're already into this war. The real victory is going to be if Iran is deprived of its nuclear capabilities. No doubt, I've been talking to you already for a few times. There were times which it seemed like Israel is in a situation of despair. No doubt that in the last few months, Israel went through a phase. Israel is no doubt the strongest power in the Middle East, and all the enemies of Israel understand that very, very well. Looking a little about the world, I mentioned already the entrance of President Trump into office on the 20th of January. That's going to be a very different world than it was before. Closer to Israel, we're looking at Europe. The governments of Europe are falling one after the other, France and in Germany. This Islamic rise inside Europe, the fact that there's a lot of hatred towards the Muslim, the right wing is coming up. No doubt that there are major changes in Europe. Anti-Semitism is on the rise, especially in Western Europe. And again, an issue that I mentioned already, the issue of refugees. I assume that the European countries will try to get a lot of the Syrian refugees out of Syria, out of Europe, back into Syria. And of course, you have beyond all this, you have the issue of the war going on between Russia and Ukraine, which in a way is intensifying. Who knows what this is going to bring to our region, to the world? This is, of course, a major issue, which will be, I think, one of the major issues on President Trump's desk when he comes into office. A last point I wanted to mention is concerning the trial of Netanyahu here. Despite everything I just described to you, the major news item in Israel is the Netanyahu trial. No doubt that this trial, any way you look at it, is one big headache, especially in the middle of a war. And some people ask, how is the prime minister exactly handling the country as he's also handling his own personal trial? And I have to tell you here a story about Prime Minister Netanyahu, a personal story. When I was ambassador to let's say to Moldova. I remember bringing a few years ago the president of Moldova to meet with Netanyahu, and the meeting was set in the evening for 9 p.m. Now, Netanyahu, during that day already, he spent the morning in court. He had to run the country, and 9 o'clock he meets with the president of Moldova, and he gives him. I of course gave him all the papers to prepare and all that. And he was fully prepared, and he gave him a PowerPoint presentation of what Israel can give Moldova and so on. Very powerful. I thought to myself, wow, this guy, works in a day like we work maybe in a month, and everything that went through, and he presented everything at 9 p.m. as if he just started the day. Just unbelievable. So the amount of power that this is, it looks almost inhumane the way that he works. So that's just for in brackets to tell you about the prime minister, and it seems like he's handling the trial and the country very well. So that's it for now, and if we still have time for questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that very thorough overview, as always, of what is happening in the Middle East. There's a country you didn't mention, and I want to ask you about. I believe back in 1973, you fought in Egypt, and then later you went in to become a diplomat in Egypt. What do you think is the threat level right now coming from Egypt, either currently in this war or projecting out in terms of concerns moving forward with Egypt?
First of all, Egypt is always a concern. Egypt sees itself as the leader of the Arab world. Even though we have a peace treaty and so on, and we have pretty good, military relations and all that, if you ask the Egyptian officers who is the major threat to Egypt or the Egyptian army, they'll tell you it's Israel. So Egypt is always a threat. Egypt is a strong threat. They have a very strong military. I know and respect this military. As you mentioned, I fought against them in 1973, and I know their power today. Very, very powerful. I think that to be on the optimistic side, I think that Egypt now, with President Trump coming into office, won't dare to go on, let's say, an animosity path or a war path with Israel. I think that they'll be more on they'll play it safe. They'll go more for the Abraham Accords with what Saudi Arabia is going to do, to be anti-Iran. I think they'll play the game according to what the President Trump wants. And I think this basically means good for us, at least for the next few years. But Egypt is always the largest, threat to Israel, and we always have to look very carefully at what the Egyptians are doing and thinking.
Now, when we follow the events of this war, it's kind of like there's this chain reaction happening. Things started in Gaza. The next thing we know, it's opening up on the Lebanon front. The next thing we know, Iran is being weakened. Syria, the regime there is falling. What do you think? You're not a prophet. What do you think is the next major event in this war? Do you think, for example, that the Houthis in Yemen could be overthrown by the majority Sunni population in that country? Do you think there's going to be a revolution in Iran? What potentially could we be looking at as the next part of this chain reaction?
Well, first of all, our hope is that the Iranian regime will fall. That's a major thing. If the Iranian regime will fall, that means that the Houthi regime will also fall because they of course depend on Iran. That is the next phase, meaning we have to get Iran. Meaning, first of all, we have to diffuse the nuclear issue from the Iranians and from this conflict. And then, of course, our hope is, and the hope of the Iranian people, much more than us, that there will be a change of regime in Iran. And hopefully also in Yemen, although Yemen is less important, for us and of course much weaker. Yemen is a humanitarian tragedy within itself. We also have to look at another thing, which is who is Israel going to make peace with? And I think we're going for a continuation of the Abraham Accords. I think other countries are going to join. Sudan would join. I think things will stabilize and they will rejoin the process. And also other Arab countries, which of course the most important one is Saudi Arabia. And who knows, maybe we'll be talking in a year or two or three. Maybe even United Syria will look to join something like that. So that's hard to tell. So these are the two things we're the two lines that we're looking at. But again, who predicted that Assad will fall and will fall so quickly? So in the Middle East, you never know. And the most important thing is that you have to be powerful and to show power and not weakness. And the way we're acting in the last few months, I think we're back into showing the strength of Israel. And the way we're acting now in Syria, which is a very, very careful way of defense, but also showing the power of Israel to enter the positions and to be very close to Damascus. I think this is very, very important for Israel's image in the Middle East.
And just to clarify, we have just a few minutes left, but in terms of dealing with the problem of a nuclear Iran, do you see any solution other than a military option?
Yes, I see the Iranians surrendering, let's say, to if they come to their senses. I think that they will surrender the nuclear issue because they'll understand that President Trump is probably going to choke them economically. And why do they need it? Meaning they're already in a very shaky situation. The people of Iran who thought that Iran is this superpower that threatens Israel and is going to destroy Israel and so on, they see that it's not exactly powerful. And all the friends of Iran are falling one after the other. So there is this resentment inside anyway against the Iranian regime. So it might work to really change Iran, and that Iran and of course the Iranians are very interested in a strong economy, meaning that there's no the Iranian people. There's no doubt about that. So there will be a clash of interest, but if worse comes to worse, it will be a military solution.
Former Ambassador Eli Yerushalmi, always a great pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for this very broad view of what is happening here in the war. Some of our viewers, as we're watching this, asked about what's happening in Judea and Samaria. So stay tuned tomorrow. We're going to focus almost exclusively on that issue. So make sure to continue watching these briefings, whether it's on the Zoom or whether you're watching on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, consider liking, subscribing, and sharing these briefings. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning in. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.